The champagne flute slipped from my mother's manicured fingers, shattering on the marble floor like the carefully constructed facade of our family's superiority. Her perfectly painted lips formed a silent O of disbelief, mirroring the stunned expressions plastered across the faces of my siblings. It wasn't the broken glass that held their gaze, however. It was the quiet woman standing beside me, the woman they'd always dismissed as just another pretty face, my wife, Evelyn, who had just calmly accepted the Nobel Prize in Physics via a live video feed on the ballroom's massive screen. The whispers had always been there, a constant low hum beneath the surface of every family gathering. "Isn't she lovely, dear? Such a charming smile." Then the subtle shift of eyes, the barely perceptible downturn of a lip corner. Of course, not everyone needs a high-powered career, does she? My mother, bless her perfectly coiffed head, had perfected the art of the condescending compliment, each word a carefully aimed dart at Evelyn's quiet demeanor. My siblings, Mark and Carol, were less subtle. Mark, the boisterous lawyer with a wife who chaired multiple charity committees, would boom about the importance of intellectual equals in a marriage, always managing to catch Evelyn's eye with a pitying glance. Carol, the impeccably dressed gallery owner whose husband was a renowned surgeon, would inquire about Evelyn's little hobbies with an air that suggested they were akin to collecting porcelain dolls or arranging silk flowers. They saw Evelyn as a beautiful anomaly, a delightful detour I'd taken on my path to, well, whatever path they had envisioned for me. I was Thomas Ashton, the youngest of three, the one who'd always coasted a bit, relying on charm and a comfortable inheritance rather than the relentless ambition that fueled my elder siblings. When I'd brought Evelyn home 5 years ago, a whirlwind romance that blossomed over shared laughter in a dusty antique shop, they'd been polite, outwardly welcoming, but the underlying sentiment was clear. She was a trophy, a pretty ornament to adorn my arm, certainly not a partner who could engage in the serious conversations that dominated our family dinners, discussions about mergers and acquisitions, art auctions fetching millions, or the intricate details of complex surgeries. And perhaps, in the beginning, even I hadn't fully grasped the depths of Evelyn. Our initial connection had been undeniably physical, a magnetic pull that had surprised even myself. But beneath the captivating beauty and the gentle smile was a keen intellect and insatiable curiosity that she often kept veiled in the company of others, as if anticipating their judgment. I'd catch glimpses of it in our quiet moments together, late at night in our small apartment, her brow furrowed in concentration as she read complex scientific papers, or the spark in her eyes when she discussed obscure theories with a passion that belied her usual reserve. Our life together was a stark contrast to the expectations of my family. While they hosted lavish parties and networked relentlessly, Evelyn and I found joy in simple things: long walks in the park, cooking together, spending hours lost in conversation about everything and nothing. She never pressured me to pursue some grand career, content with my work as a freelance photographer, a profession they viewed with thinly disguised disdain. "Such a creative outlet, dear," my mother had once remarked, the implication hanging heavy in the air that it was hardly a suitable occupation for a man of my background. The annual Ashton family gala was always a torturous affair for Evelyn. It was a stage for my family to showcase their achievements, their connections, their seemingly perfect lives. Evelyn would navigate the crowded rooms with grace, a polite smile fixed on her face as she endured the endless stream of condescending remarks and dismissive questions. I would try my best to shield her, to steer conversations towards neutral topics, but the subtle jabs always seemed to find their mark. I saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes, the way she would subtly withdraw, and a familiar surge of anger would rise within me. Why couldn't they see her? Why were they so blinded by their own self-importance? This year, however, felt different. There was a quiet anticipation in Evelyn's demeanor in the weeks leading up to the gala, a subtle excitement that she hadn't quite revealed. She'd been spending more time in her study, the soft glow of her computer screen illuminating the late hours. When I'd ask what she was working on, she'd simply smile and say, "Just some research, darling. Nothing to bore your family with." The night of the gala arrived with its usual pomp and circumstance. The Ashton mansion glittered under the lights, filled with the city's elite, all dressed in their finest attire. My family was in their element, effortlessly gliding through the crowd, basking in the admiration they so readily sought. Evelyn, stunning in a simple yet elegant navy gown, stayed close to my side, her hand a reassuring presence on my arm. As the evening progressed, a hush fell over the ballroom. A large screen had been set up, and my father, with a practiced air of importance, stepped onto a small stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming through the room, "we have a special announcement tonight." My stomach clenched. Usually, these special announcements involved some new business venture of Mark's or Carol's latest art acquisition. "We are incredibly proud to share," my father continued, a wide smile plastered on his face, "that a groundbreaking achievement has been made by one of our own community." He paused for dramatic effect. "The Nobel Prize in Physics has just been awarded for the discovery of a new form of dark matter." A polite applause rippled through the room. Physics was hardly a topic that ignited passion among this crowd of lawyers, financiers, and art aficionados. My mother leaned towards me, whispering, "Darling, who do you think it is?" My eyes were fixed on Evelyn. She hadn't reacted to the announcement, her expression calm, almost serene. But there was a faint tremor in her hand that held her champagne flute. On the screen, the image of the Nobel Prize Committee in Stockholm flickered, followed by a live feed of the laureate accepting the award remotely. A woman with intelligent, piercing eyes and a warm smile filled the screen. My breath hitched. I knew those eyes. I knew that smile. The woman on the screen began to speak, her voice clear and steady, tinged with a slight, familiar accent. "I am deeply honored and humbled to receive this prestigious award." It was Evelyn. The champagne flute slipped from my mother's manicured fingers. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by the clatter of the shattered glass. Every eye turned to Evelyn, a mixture of disbelief, shock, and dawning realization on their faces. The trophy wife, the quiet woman who'd always stood in my shadow, had just illuminated the entire world with her brilliance. And I, her husband, suddenly saw her in a light that dwarfed even the love I already held for her. The game, I realized with a jolt of exhilaration, had irrevocably changed. This is only the beginning. Believe me, the truth will hit harder than any humiliation. The silence that followed Evelyn's acceptance speech was thick, palpable, heavy with unspoken questions and a lifetime of misjudgments. My mother, still frozen, looked as though she'd seen a ghost. Mark and Carol, usually so quick with a witty retort or a cutting remark, stood utterly agape, their carefully constructed personas crumbling before my eyes. For years, they had reveled in their intellectual superiority, their professional achievements, subtly belittling anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success. And now, the quiet woman they dismissed as an accessory had eclipsed them all, not with a flashy deal or a curated art collection, but with a scientific breakthrough that would undoubtedly change the world. I felt a surge of triumph, a powerful, almost intoxicating wave that washed over me. It wasn't a malicious joy, but rather a profound vindication. For years, I had quietly fumed at their dismissive attitudes, their condescending smiles, their thinly veiled insults directed at Evelyn. I had always known she was brilliant, but even I, in my quiet way, had underestimated the sheer scale of her genius. Now the world knew, and more importantly, they knew. Evelyn, however, remained remarkably composed. As the applause finally erupted, a delayed, somewhat stunned, but nonetheless genuine ovation, she simply offered a small, graceful nod to the screen, her eyes briefly meeting mine. In that fleeting moment, I saw not arrogance or self-congratulation, but a quiet satisfaction, a deep peace that settled within her. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong for her. It was about the culmination of years of tireless work, a lifelong pursuit of understanding the universe's most profound mysteries. My father, ever the consummate host, was the first to regain his composure, albeit shakily. He cleared his throat, his face a complex mixture of shock and a dawning, almost bewildered pride. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, a truly astonishing revelation." He forced a smile, looking genuinely lost for words. "My daughter-in-law, Evelyn Ashton! Incredible!" The words sounded hollow, as if he were trying to catch up to a reality that had just dramatically shifted beneath his feet. Suddenly, the room was buzzing. People who had barely acknowledged Evelyn's existence moments before were now clamoring to congratulate her, their faces alight with curiosity and a desperate need to associate themselves with this newfound brilliance. A renowned astrophysicist from a prestigious university, whom I'd overheard dismissing her earlier in the evening, now practically bowed, extending his hand with fervent admiration. "Dr. Ashton, it is an absolute honor. Your work on dark matter? Truly revolutionary." Evelyn handled it all with an innate grace that astounded me. She responded to each compliment, each question, with humble intelligence and a genuine warmth that drew people in. There was no hint of resentment, no trace of the years of subtle slights. She spoke eloquently about her research, her voice clear and resonant, explaining complex concepts with a clarity that even I, with my limited scientific background, could grasp. She was utterly in her element, a supernova finally allowed to shine, and the light she emitted was breathtaking. I watched my family from a slight distance. My mother, having recovered her composure, was now attempting to navigate the sudden shift in social dynamics. She approached Evelyn, her smile a little too wide, her movements a little too stiff. "Evelyn, darling, we had no idea you've been so modest." The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled attempt to reframe their previous dismissal as Evelyn's choice. Evelyn simply smiled, a polite, unreadable expression. "I prefer to let my work speak for itself, Mother," she replied gently, the truth embedded in her soft tone. Mark and Carol, meanwhile, were struggling. I saw Mark trying to engage Evelyn in a conversation about funding and patents, clearly attempting to find a business angle, something familiar to grasp onto. Evelyn listened patiently, then politely redirected the conversation back to the purely scientific implications of her discovery, leaving him floundering. Carol, on the other hand, seemed genuinely flummoxed. Her usual air of sophisticated detachment had evaporated, replaced by a raw, unmasked envy. She kept glancing at Evelyn's simple gown, as if trying to reconcile the understated elegance with the magnitude of the achievement. The weight of their past dismissals, the years of silent judgment, hung heavy in the air between them. They were no longer the arbiters of success. Evelyn was, and they had missed it. They had been so consumed by their own superficial metrics, wealth, social standing, conventional careers, that they had completely overlooked the quiet, profound genius living right among them. Later that evening, after most of the guests had departed and the last strains of the jazz band faded, Evelyn and I stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. The mansion, usually a symbol of my family's imposing presence, now felt almost small. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a sigh escaping her lips. "I'm tired, Thomas, but yes, I'm more than all right." I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her closer. "They don't know what to do they?" She chuckled softly. "No, they don't. And it's not just them, is it? It's everyone who ever looked at me and decided they knew my worth. They'll never look at you the same way again," I said, stating the obvious. "No," she agreed, her voice thoughtful. "But the truth is, I haven't really changed. I've always been this person. It's their perception that changed. And perhaps," she paused, looking up at the stars, "perhaps that's the real victory." I looked down at her, my heart swelling with an emotion too complex to name. It was love, yes, deeper and more profound than ever, but it was also an immense respect, a quiet awe for her resilience, her unwavering dedication, and her profound humility. She hadn't sought this moment of public recognition to humble others, but it had done so anyway, inadvertently, powerfully. And I was proud, not just of her achievements, but of the woman she was, the woman I had always known, even when the world around us refused to see her. The next chapter, I knew, would be entirely different. The old rules no longer applied. We're almost there. The next part is the moment of truth, where everything falls into place. The weeks that followed the gala were a whirlwind, a surreal blur of interviews, congratulatory calls, and scientific conferences that had previously seemed impossibly out of reach. Evelyn, once the quiet presence in my shadow, was now a global figure, her name synonymous with groundbreaking discovery. My phone, which rarely rang for anything more exciting than a photography gig, was now constantly alight with messages from long-lost acquaintances and distant relatives, all eager to express their undying pride in our Evelyn. The hypocrisy was nauseating. But Evelyn, with her innate grace, navigated it all with a calm that continually astounded me. She seemed utterly unfazed by the sudden deluge of attention, her focus unwavering from her true passion. My family, however, struggled to adjust to this new reality. The initial shock had given way to an awkward scramble for relevance. My mother, who once subtly questioned Evelyn's value, now boasted about my brilliant daughter-in-law to anyone who would listen, conveniently omitting the years of dismissive remarks. She even started trying to arrange intellectual gatherings at the mansion, hoping Evelyn's newfound prestige would rub off on her social standing. Evelyn, ever polite, attended a few, but her subtle discomfort was palpable, her eyes often finding mine across the room with a look of shared exasperation. Mark, ever the opportunist, saw Evelyn's Nobel Prize as a new avenue for his own ambition. He began peppering her with questions about potential business ventures, patents, and investment opportunities related to her research. He even proposed a family foundation to fund her future work, clearly envisioning himself at its head, basking in her reflected glory. Evelyn listened patiently to his elaborate schemes, then with a polite but firm smile explained that her work was for the advancement of science, not for commercial exploitation. The subtle rejection left Mark visibly deflated, his carefully constructed plans crumbling before his eyes. Carol was perhaps the most visibly affected. Her envy, once a subtle undercurrent, now manifested as a thinly veiled resentment. She avoided eye contact with Evelyn, her usual confident chatter replaced by an uncharacteristic silence or sharp, unrelated comments. I overheard her one afternoon, speaking on the phone, complaining about how some people get all the luck and how true genius isn't always recognized. clearly trying to undermine Evelyn's achievement to whomever was on the other end of the line. It was a pathetic display, and it only solidified my growing detachment from their shallow world. The real shift, though, happened not in grand public displays, but in the quiet moments. There was a particular evening, a month after the gala, when my parents invited us to dinner at their club. It was a smaller, more intimate affair than the gala, but the tension was almost thicker. My mother, attempting to make amends, brought up Evelyn's childhood. Evelyn was always such a quiet child, wasn't she? So studious. The implication was clear. She was quiet because she was socially awkward, studious because she had nothing else. Evelyn, usually one to let such remarks pass, simply smiled. Yes, Mother, I was. I spent a lot of time alone, observing, learning, while others were focused on external validation. Her gaze, soft yet unwavering, lingered on my mother for a moment. It wasn't accusatory, but rather a statement of simple, undeniable truth. My mother flinched, the forced smile on her face faltering. Later, during the main course, Mark launched into a detailed account of his latest corporate triumph, clearly trying to steer the conversation back to his own accomplishments. He spoke of millions, of complex legal maneuvers, of outsmarting competitors. He paused, expecting the usual admiration. Evelyn, taking a sip of water, calmly interjected. "That's fascinating, Mark. It sounds like you're very skilled at optimizing existing systems. My work, of course, focuses on discovering entirely new ones, building something from absolute zero, where no one has ever ventured before." Her words were delivered without malice, but the contrast she drew was stark and undeniable. Mark's face visibly reddened, his carefully constructed narrative of superior intelligence crumbling under the weight of her quiet brilliance. The final moment of truth came for me, personally, a few weeks later. My father called me into his study, a room I had always associated with his imposing presence and my own perceived shortcomings. He sat behind his grand desk, looking uncharacteristically humbled. "Thomas," he began, his voice softer than I had ever heard it, I was wrong about Evelyn. About her potential, about a lot of things." He looked genuinely uncomfortable, something I'd rarely seen from him. "We've always valued a certain kind of visible success in this family. And Evelyn's, it was quiet, hidden." He paused, looking directly at me. "And you too, Thomas. I often worried about your unconventional path. Thought you were wasting your potential. But you saw something in Evelyn we didn't. You chose wisely. You supported her. That counts for something, doesn't it?" It was as close to an apology as I would ever get from my father. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Their validation no longer mattered. Their acceptance, which I had unconsciously craved for so long, felt hollow. I didn't need their approval for my life, my choices, or my wife. Evelyn's triumph wasn't just hers, it was ours. It was a testament to following your own path, to seeing the true worth in people regardless of what society or family dictates. We decided to move. Not far, but enough to create a new space, away from the constant gravitational pull of the Ashton family's expectations. We found a beautiful house with a large, bright study for Evelyn and a spacious studio for me. Our life continued as it always had, filled with quiet moments, shared laughter, and deep conversations, but now it was unburdened by the need to prove anything to anyone. Evelyn, the woman they had called simple, had taught them and me the most profound lesson. True value is often found not in the loud proclamations of the world, but in the quiet depths of genius, resilience, and unwavering authenticity. She had not sought to humiliate them, but in her serene victory, they had been forced to confront their own shallow judgments. And in that confrontation, I found my own liberation, stepping out of their shadow and into the clear, brilliant light of our shared life. The past was behind us, and the future, limitless and bright, was entirely our own.